Hi there, you join me, Andy, again in the HE room. We're going to look at another recipe this week. I did mention at the end of my last one, we're going to move on this week to doing a dessert. We're going to look at doing a simple fruit crumble. I hope you guys did enjoy doing the vegetable soup. I had some lovely pictures sent in around the fact that you enjoyed that and you enjoyed spending the time cooking. Now, I have got two recipes that I've put online. So one is for, there we go, a slightly more advanced way of doing a crumble, and one's a little slightly easier. The only difference really in them is the fact that when it comes to doing the topping, one of which we make ourselves by mixing the flour, butter and sugar, and the other one is a little bit of a cheat. If we've got any shortbread left over from Christmas or some nuts, I've got walnuts there, but hazelnuts actually taste really good. We just put that on as the topping when we get to that stage. Now, when it comes to fruit, it does say on the recipe to use Bramley apples. When I went to the larder today, all I had was Gala. Doesn't really matter what you use. I'm going to go as well with something that we might have frozen, because during this time, it's the sort of thing we might have in our freezers. Now, these are just mixed berries, you can see there, and in there is blackberries, strawberries, black currants and red currants. So that's what we're going to be using for our inside of our crumble. Now, the ingredients that are on the sheets state that we need some demerara sugar, some caster sugar, some perhaps granulated sugar, some flour and some butter. On top of that, when we come to it, if you have got some, I'll just get it now for you, some cinnamon. That actually is a really nice thing to put on the topping if we're doing an apple crumble. I'm going to move on now. I'm going to wash my hands and I'm going to show you how to preheat your oven. My hands are washed now. I've got my area all wiped down. I've got some of the equipment that I need today. I've got a set of scales. I've got a chopping board. Now, from the feedback last time, I did use the wrong board. I apologise. Because we are using fruit today, I've gone with green. I've got a couple of different mixing bowls, and I've got my oven-proof dishes. This one we call a ramekin, and that's going to be used for the cheats one, because I'm just going to put a little bit of topping on that one. And this is the other oven-proof dish that I'm going to use. I have a knife. It doesn't sort of matter which sort of knife you use, but I would definitely go for a sharp one with quite a deep blade. And remember, knives are dangerous. Keep those fingers away from the knife edge. And I think that's about it. Oh, the only other thing I have got is a ladle for when we're moving some of the fruit and perhaps doing some mixing with a spatula. I'm going to move over now to preheat my oven. Now, on the recipe it says to preheat your oven to 170 or 180 degrees. You may well need an adult's help to do that. I'm just going to go over to my oven now and preheat it with the fan assisted to 180 degrees. Now, we preheat our oven while we're doing the rest of the recipe, or starting the recipe, because then when we come to put the crumble into the oven, it'll be ready and nice and warm to go. We're going to move on now to doing our preparation of our ingredients. We're now going to prepare our apples and our other fruits. You could use pears, they're quite good to do it with, before we put them into our mixture. With your scales, just check the amount you've got. The apples that I've got here weigh about 100 grams each. And the recipe says 450 grams of fruit. Now, what you could do there is perhaps do 300, so that would be 3 apples and then the rest in berries, or however you like it. Whatever fruit you've got there available, I would advise it to be perhaps apples, pears and berries, or if you've got some rhubarb, perhaps fruits like orange and banana aren't really that suitable for a crumble. So we're going to prepare the vegetables now. This is where you'll need your knife, because what we're going to do is we're going to cut and peel our apples. I have my chopping board and I have the equipment that I need with a peeler and a knife before I prepare my apples. What I'm going to do is moving my peeler away from my hand. Now that's quite important. Never peel back towards your hand. It may be that you need an adult to help you with this, but I'm just going to slowly move the peeler around each apple until we take off all of the skin. Oops, that took a chunk. Hasn't got to be super tidy. So we get to having a peeled apple. After we've peeled the apple, the peel can go in the bin or you could eat it. We're going to top and tail our apple and then cut it into quarters. It's very important at this stage that we take out the core and the pips. So all I'm going to do is just run the knife down the centres to remove the core and the pips. And I can discard the waste in a second. So I'm left with my 4 quarters of apple, and all I'm going to do now is just to slice those quarters into chunks. It really doesn't matter how you chunk or slice, but that's about the size we're looking for to go into our crumble. I'm going to do that now with all 3 of my apples. I'm just coming to the end now of preparing all 4 of my apples, and I've just put them into a small mixing bowl. To see where I am weight wise, I'm hoping you can see this, that says 291 grams, and for the sort of thing I'm looking for, that's roughly where I want to be, because I'd like mine to not have loads of apple in and to be quite mixed. I could cut another apple just to take that up to being closer to the 400, but that's what I'm looking for. A nice amount of apple that's just chopped up. To the apple, I'm now going to add my frozen berry mix, and I'm going to look here to put around probably 200 grams in. 185, 194, we're nearly there. Oh, that went up. I'll take one of the strawberries out, and that's 199. Now I'm absolutely fine with that, and there's my berry mix. I'm going to now simply add my berries into my apple and give that a nice stir around. After I've got my fruit mix, I'm now going to weigh out my granulated sugar, and I'm looking here for between 75 and 80 grams. And there we go, 80 grams. And I'm going to add that into my fruit mix. And give that a really nice stir around. The only other thing I am going to add at this stage is I'm going to add a tablespoon of flour. That's plain flour, and it just adds to the thickness of the juice that comes out of the fruit for the filling. Mix it all around until it's all nicely coated, and there is my filling for my fruit crumbles. Now that you've completed your filling, we're going to move on to make the crumble topping. And what the crumble topping is, it's a mixture of the flour and the butter. So I'm now going to weigh out, I've set my zero he says, come on, come back to 0. It's nice when the scales work. So at the moment my scales aren't working. So I'm going to have to add 85 grams on. So you're going to weigh out 100 grams of plain flour. So I'm looking for it to go to 185 because I need to add on my 85 because it wasn't taking into account my bowl. A little bit too much. What am I on? 189. Take a little tiny bit back out. 186. Well, that's near enough for me. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cube my butter. It's quite important at this stage that the butter that you're using is kept quite cold. I haven't got the right colour chopping board for this one, but we'll work with it. Now into my bowl, I've added just over 50, it says 56. I might take a little bit more off that because we're looking for it to be as close to 50 as possible. Grams of butter. Now that butter's nice and cold. So what I'm going to do is now cube the butter. So all we do there is like we've done with our vegetables last week, we're just going to make our butter into small cubes, being aware of the edge of the knife, remember. If you find it easier to bridge, you can do it that way. And then we're going to add our butter into our flour. So we take it and just put it in. Now what we're going to do to create the crumble topping is you're going to mix these together with your fingers. I know you're going to really like that. So in my hands go, and I'm going to start mixing the flour in with the butter. Now it's important we don't overwork this into really, really small pieces because otherwise you just won't get the crunch on your crumble. And nobody likes a crumble without a crunch. So I'm going to work on that and just make sure that all of the butter is worked into the flour. It kind of makes like breadcrumbs. So you'll notice that I changed my mixing bowl. I actually found that the mixing bowl, the green one, was too small for my hands. And also now you can see the way that I'm working the butter into the flour. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a nice textured sort of breadcrumb that you can rub between your hands, and that is going to become our crumble topping, hopefully with a nice bit of crunch. At this stage, it's worth mentioning the cheats way that I mentioned, to do with the shortbread biscuits and the nuts. What you can do is just put a couple, we'll go for 4, not a couple at all, of the shortbread fingers into a food processor with a small handful of nuts. And I am just going to put a little tiny bit of ground cinnamon in there just to add to flavour because we've got quite a lot of apple in. And all we're going to do with that is just blitz it for a couple, well, probably not even a minute. Now I'm not going to do that for too long because I don't want it to become a powder. But what I have got in here now is really quick, nutty, and a little bit of cinnamon with that shortbread topping for a crumble. Now if we think about what goes into shortbread, it's exactly the same really as what's in our crumble topping because it's got the butter, the flour and the sugar in it. So it actually works really, really well. The one thing I forgot to do was I've got my butter and my flour mixed together here. Silly Andy forgot to add his demerara sugar. So exactly the same, weigh out your demerara sugar, that was 50 grams, and that's going to go in to my topping. That will help to make it nice and brown and to make it crispy on the top. I'm now going to put the filling into the 2 oven-proof bowls that we spoke about earlier. So all I'm going to do is tip all the berries and apple into the large one, and I've got the small one, so I'm going to take some of that mixture and put it into the small one. These are almost like doing individual puddings. So we flatten that down, and then we're going to add our toppings. To the small one, I'm going to put the cheats topping on, being very careful. I'm just going to pat that down. I can actually smell the walnuts in that as I'm doing it. I must admit, I do really like quite a lot of topping on my crumbles. We've got a little bit left there, so that can start off going in the big one. And then I'm going to take my crumble mixture for the big one and just nice and evenly move it over the top. And these are now ready to go into our oven. Now our oven, as I mentioned at the start, has been preheated to 175 degrees. I'm going to take these over using my oven gloves and I'm going to put them into the oven. At this stage, it's probably worth asking an adult to help you use the oven. I've just put both of the crumbles into the oven. Now it's worth bearing in mind that the larger crumble is going to take a longer time to bake because it's in a lot bigger container. That's probably going to take around 40 minutes, but make sure we keep an eye on the oven to make sure it's not burning and overcooking. The smaller one will probably take around 20 minutes at the very most. Look for that top to go a nice golden brown because remember, we're looking for that crunch in our crumble. Whilst our crumbles are in the oven, it's a really good opportunity to tidy away and clean down our worktops. So I'm going to get on, do the washing up and tidy up my work area for when these come out of the oven and we serve them with our little treat of custard. "20 minutes has now passed and I've taken the smaller ramekin based crumble out of the oven. Now I've left that again for probably another 10 minutes just so it's handleable, because when it comes out the oven you will need an adult to help you because it'll be very, very hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hopefully move this crumble now out into my bowl. And you can see there that I've got some nice soft fruits and a nice thick sauce. I did say this week I was going to be a little bit naughty, so I'm going to add, I know that some of you might like it warm, but I quite like some cold custard adding on there, and that was just straight from the tin. My other crumble has now got probably another 15 minutes left before it comes out, but there you go. There's your delicious mixed fruit crumble, and this is the one with the cheat topping of the shortbread biscuits. I am just going to show you the finished result of the larger crumble. Remember, if we are going near the oven, ask an adult to help you and always wear your oven gloves. And there is our finished result of our mixed fruit crumble. Now this is the one with the traditional topping on it of the flour, butter and demerara sugar. Next week we are going to move on to doing a vegetable based curry. So for that we'll be looking at using a quite simple curry powder and then adding in some vegetables, garlic and onion. We can put that with some rice hopefully. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today. Enjoy it and happy cooking.